Hey dude, horizontal stuff. I think actually some of these scraps are, well, I know this one for sure is from horizontal stuff. But usually that's when I use the 5/4 stuff. So 5/4 decking for horizontal stuff. I've seen guys do it with the picket, like a 5/8 picket. This is 5/4 versus the 5/8. I would avoid the picket, honestly. It just really does not hold up very well on horizontal. So this is going to be the post assembly. I'll go over that for first in terms of like the actual assembly. But layout, when you're doing horizontal, work from the top down with your measurements, but work from the bottom up on the install. So let's say, and your grade is pretty flat out there, but there's no such thing as perfect. So you are going to have some low spots and some high spots, right? So get your post set right. Use I like this, especially for a fence. You could do it with a 6 foot level, and I'm going to come back to the 6 foot thing, but you could do it with a box level, but on a long stretch of fence. I don't know how far you guys are going, but the string line level is a little bit more accurate over 50, 60 feet. Part of the thing with the steel post too is that you can cut it after you install it, but it's that's more work than it's really worth. So just set your posts to the correct height from the get go. So do the math, and I'll come back to this part too. But do the math on your total height for each post. Uh, I want this many deck boards. Let's say you're doing a 5 foot. You want it 5 foot tall, so you're going to use 13 horizontal slats. So do your math based on that. Set your posts to that height, and then run your string level. So the purpose of doing this is that it's really hard to record this while I'm drawing. This would be a horizontal component, and you can see that this rail is full width on my drawing, right? But right here we have a grade change, so this bottom rail is going to end up as a taper cut, where it kind of tapers off and then tapers off on this side. That's the advantage with doing it that way, doing your math from the top down, because if you do it the other way and just set each post to its correct height, based off the grade where it's at, then this post would end up here, and then your taper cut would be at the top, which looks like shit in my opinion. It kind of defeats the point of a horizontal fence. So if you plan your height out where this post is, maybe if you're doing a 5 foot height, for example, this post would potentially be like 4'6" off grade, but you're compensating for the change in grade right there. Does that make sense? In terms of spacing, like you can smash them up tight if you want. Most of my customers have me add a little bit of gap between that. And I've done a lot of different jobs actually with a lot of different variety, but 1/8 is pretty common spacing. 5/4 decking will shrink a little bit, but definitely not as much as like the 5/8 picket over there. 5/8 picket, if you install it with an 1/8 gap, it'll open up to fucking 1/4 inch, 3/8 after a couple years. 5/4 decking is pretty stable. That's definitely going to be my recommendation. It's a little more stable, so if you install it with a 1/8 gap, you'll probably end up with 3/16 gap over the course of several years, and it'll stop expanding after that. But whatever spacing you decide to use, I would make yourself a jig for that. I need a lighter real quick. I'm trying to smoke a cigarette, not another lighter. So I definitely recommend the 5/4. The other nice thing that's with with the 1/8 spacing, like I usually use 16 penny nails because it's almost perfectly 1/8. Um, it ends up being a hair less. It's like 3/32 or something like that is what a 16 penny nail actually measures. And there's some error with the install process that I'll kind of come back to. But it's pretty close to 1/8 of an inch, which is nice because this 5/4 decking usually comes in 5 3/8 width. So it's not a true 5.5, it's 5 3/8. So with the 1/8 spacing, it just makes the math a little bit easier. But whatever your spacing is, like let's say you want whatever that is, 3/8, ½ inch spacing, just make sure that you have a consistent spacing tool. So I've made a few spacing tools, and they're just little metal hangers that'll clip onto the fence for certain depths. But just make sure that your spacing tool is accurate. So when you get to the install part, do your math. Like I said, do your layout, set your posts from the top down, do your layout from the top down, but you want to install from the bottom up. So start with your first full width course. So anything that's going to be a taper cut, where there's grade changes, do those taper cuts at the end of the process. So start your install with your first full width board and work your way up. Install your first course. This is where you would use a box level because you want to individually check that each section is level. Get that section installed, put your spacer. I usually, if you're using nails, the nice thing too is that you can tap it into the post, set your next course on top of it, but think of it like building a brick wall, right? Here's the wall that we're trying to build. This is really hard to record while I draw. Brick, 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 brick. But I'm going to start getting at a level. And then if you build your next course on top of that, obviously you're a builder. You know, you can picture how that would go south. So if you do choose to use this 5/4 stuff, it's a little more expensive than 5/8 pickets, but totally worth the investment in my opinion, just for the stability factor. Something to look out for, and this happens a lot with 5/4 decking, you'll get a bad mill where one edge looks like this, and then the other edge is kind of the mirror. And this happens when it's getting kicked off of the joiner. So you'll get some wash on the top, and you'll get some excess material on the bottom. Something to pay attention to, and it's a really quick way to get out of level. So anyways, start with your first full width course and work your way up. Adjust your level as needed, especially pay attention to stuff like this. So there may be times where you put a nail in there, but it's not actually even touching the material that you're trying to put in. So it's like tight right here. You have a nail right here, and you're like, wow, it's like not even spacing it out. But then on the top of the board, you're going to have this wash. So you do need to pay attention to stuff like that. So in terms of posts, you could definitely use like a 4x4 steel post, as your post assembly. A couple problems with that, which is why I've never used it for horizontal. I use it for my gate terminals, so latch side and hinge side on gates for the horizontal setup. But on the fence itself, I avoid the tubing approach. The main problem is honestly just the cost of the fasteners. The fasteners to go through 5/4 decking into a metal tubing, they're about $50 for, I don't know, I think it's like 150 in a pack. And when you think about 2 screws per deck board, so if you're going the full 6 foot, it's 17 deck boards that you need to cover the span. 2 per deck board per side. You only get 150 in a box for $50. You blow through fasteners really quick. And that's the big reason why I avoid that. The second reason why I avoid it though is it's really hard to there's no room for error with your level. So if you do install a deck board that has something funky like this and you realize that it's out of level, there's really no way to correct it because you've already created a hole in that square tubing that is going to track back in the same hole no matter how you try to adjust it. And you can fix that over the course of a couple rows, but if you make that mistake on your top row, you're kind of fucking screwed. You know what I mean? I like this setup. So it's a U-channel. It's 4-inch flange, 1.5 inches on the A side or whatever, and then I just bevel out the edges so that it actually slides in there. Drill press a couple holes on the back of the U-channel so that you can run a lag bolt into the wood component. But then as you're installing your rails onto a wood surface with wood screws. So the fasteners are cheaper, that's part of it. But you also have a little more grace and forgiveness where if you do set a rail that's at the wrong height, you can shift it up, run your screws into a different piece of the material, and good to go. And then I always trim over the top of this post connection anyways. So wherever your screws end up, it doesn't matter visually. Structurally, it's not really going to matter. Just stain it and seal it and you'll be fine. But visually, it's not going to matter because that whole, everything that's fastened to that is going to get trimmed out anyways. And I usually staple the trim board just so the fastener holes aren't super obvious on the trim component. That's the gist of it though. I'll give you a call, but I'll send this to you first before we call. So I'll talk to you later, bro. Bye.